Is it worth it to have kids anymore?
Do people regret having kids?
Does having kids make your life worse or better?
Who's happier, parents or non-parents?
Are people choosing to have less kids these days?
Does religion have an influence on how big your family's going to be?
Why do we want to become parents? That's what we're going to be talking about in today's episode, all about becoming parents, being a parent, and it's going to be super fun.
And I think that we're having this discussion because we're newly married and we're thinking about having kids. And so we wanted to have a discussion between ourselves, with all of you, about, what is the importance of having kids? Is it important anymore? Why are people seemingly having fewer kids than they've ever had?
Or no kids.
Or no kids.
Choosing the no kid route.
Yep. And especially in America, especially like just developed countries.
Yeah.
And, we're going to talk about that, talk about what we want to do. And we even asked our sisters, who are both parents, questions that, you might want to ask parents, about, do they regret having kids? Do they ever idolize other people who don't have kids? Do they ever think about the freedom that they lost? Kind of negative questions, but they're based on like some of the concerns I think other people would have before having kids, right? And so that is what we're going to be talking about today.
Lots of exciting things, but before we get into it, if you guys could please help us out, subscribe, and like this video. It really helps the algorithm know that you guys like seeing our videos. So
to start this off, I'm just going to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want kids?
I do want kids. Do you want kids, honey?
Yes.
We've obviously already talked about this before we even got married years and years ago, but...
Right. And I think we both... I've always wanted kids, but I'm at that point where since I haven't had them yet, I'm more okay with not having them. It's a weird thing that I think with men, the longer you wait, the more you're okay with not having it. I think it's the opposite with women. I'm not sure. I don't have any studies to back that up.
Yeah, but just from personal experience, aka me.
Right.
And remember, it was like 5 years ago when we first started this channel. Mitch and I did a couples Q&A, and one of the questions was how many kids did we want? And I said I would want 4 kids. And Mitch, you said how many kids you would want?
Did I say 8?
You said 8. I'm like, hell no, you got the wrong girl. I'm not pushing out 8 kids. That is crazy.
But I qualified it with, that's just how many I would want if I could have my desired size of my family. I like big families,
I do too. I came from a big family. I wanted 4 because there was 4 kids in my family, and I thought that was like a good number.
Right.
And I like even numbers. So I was like, 4 is a good number to have a big family.
Right. Because, 1, you're an only child. 2, you got teaming up against each other. 3, you can almost have 2 teaming up against 1. But I feel like 4, you're always going to have a buddy. You're always going to have that person. So.
And that's how it felt with me and my siblings. I have an older sister and an older brother who were like, they were born really close together, like 13 months apart, and they were like buddies. And then my mom had me. I was like an accident, a happy accident. And then so she's like, okay, well, I have to have one more so she can have like a bestie who is my little brother. And like we were besties growing up. Like we did everything together, and it was so fun. Like, and that's what I would want for my kids. So that's why I was like 4 at the time. But things have definitely changed for me.
Right. And so, big families just seem to be good. But like I said, as I continue to just grow and age, I guess I'm not like, I don't feel the rush to do it. And I think the difference is between men and women, why I might not feel it and why I think the older you get, the more you want to have kids. Or like the more pressing it feels is because you have a time limit and I don't, like I could have kids, like just generally men can usually still have kids going into their 70s. I think Robert De Niro just had a kid or something. He's like 75.
Oh my God.
And so, there's no time frame for me. I could always have a kid.
And I think that some people like to ignore that or say that it's insensitive to say that women have like a biological clock when it comes to having kids, because it's just the truth. Like, it's just true.
Yep.
Like, I don't know what else to say about it, but.
Yeah, and I think there's an insensitive way to say it.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is, because like I don't think that I would ever be insensitive about that. It is just true. But also other people can just feel offended by it because they know it's true.
Yeah.
And they don't. I feel like a lot of people, this is a different topic, but I feel like a lot of people don't like admitting truth. You know, they just want to live in a make-believe world sometimes. And, if they feel like they can badger you into not saying it, even though it's true, then they will. And I feel like that's that, And so we both want to have kids. I guess we both are cool with not having kids right now. Like right now.
Speak for yourself.
No, like,
No, I'm just kidding.
Like I feel like you have been
right
saying, I feel like you have been saying that, another year or something like that.
Yeah, I'm 26 for reference, but I have had the biggest baby fever the last like maybe 6 months.
Yep.
I'm just like, I want a baby so bad. And when we got married, I was like, I want to wait like at least 2 or 3, 4-ish years maybe to like have a kid. And now I'm like thinking back on that, I'm like, okay, maybe like next year. I don't know, but I just have like the biggest baby fever. I think they're so cute. Yep. And I'm just like, I'm getting older. I know I'm 26. Some people are going to be like, you're still young. And yeah, I am still young, but I also don't want to be like a super old parent. Like, no offense to older parents, but I don't want to be like an old parent either.
Right.
And I do want my body to like snap back. Like, some people are like, probably think that's vain. But it's like, it's my body for the rest of my life. Like, I have to live in it for the rest of my life, and I want it to look good still. So
right. I don't think it's vain. I just think you have to be ready for stuff like that to happen. And
changes are inevitable. But.
Right. You got to be realistic about it. That's part of what we're going to talk about later too. But I read a story about this woman who had kids because she had baby fever, and she regrets it now. And she felt that she let the hormones and like baby fever type of stuff convince her to do something that she didn't want to do.
Yeah.
I can see that. When you read stories like that, you always have to take them in like
with a grain of salt.
With a grain of salt, because you don't know how mature this person is. Is like,
let's get into it.
About regret, right? I feel like that's a touchy subject.
Yeah.
Right. Even admitting that you regret having kids. When I hear someone say that they regret having kids or something like that, it does feel a little like, selfish and shallow and stuff like that. But then again, when I start thinking of it, I'm like, oh, am I going to regret it? So like, I think that it's a touchy subject because people can judge, and like you can even be brought to judge someone even though you don't want to and stuff. So I had to check myself with that. Because I feel like that is a good question to ask, because if you are someone who is regretful and who is going to regret having kids. I mean, imagine being the child of someone who says, I regret having kids.
Right. Or you were a mistake.
Or you were a mistake.
Or an accident and blah, blah, blah. Right. Like, that would be, I'd be like, I didn't effing choose to be birthed. Like, I didn't choose this. And the fact that you regret it is like, now I'm questioning my entire existence. Right. It's like.
And you can do that so easily, being like, just like not being grateful for life, like even without your parents saying like they regret it or you were a mistake and stuff like that.
Right.
Like when you get in trouble or something. I remember as a kid just saying that all the time. Well, you brought me into this world.
And I'll take you out, my mama said.
Exactly. And you can have regret like that and still be a good mother or father. I'm not saying you can't, but it just like sucks for that kid if they ever learned it. And I think that's a good part to read the questions and answers of our sisters, on what they said. Like, do they regret kids, and are they ever envious of people with that freedom who don't have kids?
Yeah. So for reference, my sister just turned 30. She had her first kid at 23, so he's 7 years old. And Mitch can talk about his sister. But I thought these were really interesting questions and a really interesting segment to just have them answer these questions and have somebody else's like voice on the podcast. Not actual voice, but you know what I mean. So the first question, do you ever wonder how your life would have turned out if you hadn't chosen to have children? And my sister's answer to that question was all the time I wonder. I probably wouldn't be living in Texas. I'd be taking trips every month and just really living life. And we decided to word this question in a more, positive way. Instead of saying like, do I regret having children? Because like we said, nobody wants to hear that. Obviously, I know that my sister like doesn't regret having my nephew. He's been like the biggest blessing to her and just our entire family. Like, I don't know what our family would look like if we didn't have him. So I know she doesn't regret it. But kind of like you said, like there's always just like that, I wonder what my life would have been like,
Right. Yeah, my sister, she's in her 30s, 3 kids, divorced, and she answered it in a way that I thought was pretty insightful. She said, yes, she does think about it, but just like anything else. Like, I wonder if I would have picked that job over this job.
Right.
I wonder if, even if I had waited like 30 minutes to go to the store, if this would have happened. So
Right.
just like everything, just like anything you think of like that. A lot of what ifs, but she said that she wouldn't change it, but she thinks about it. And I thought that was pretty insightful because it made me think of thinking like that, just like any type of thing in your life, right? Like even you, I had a decision, or meeting you, I had a decision between working at
a vacuum store.
a vacuum store, a grocery store, or Caribou and Coffee. And
Caribou and Coffee.
Or coffee and bagels. And I ended up choosing Caribou Coffee specifically so that I could have like social time at work, right? Vacuum store didn't see much except being like a salesman. And grocery store, I was going to be pushing carts. So, but yeah, you always wonder, what if I didn't do that? Wouldn't have met you.
Right.
My life would have been incredibly different.
Right. It's like every decision that you make your life is going to be totally different.
Yeah.
Like, and everyone thinks about that,
right.
Everyone that thinks that about their life. What if I would have made this decision? My life would have been completely different. It's just like that for everyone, whether you have kids or not, whether you took the job or not, whether you moved or not. Like everything in your life is like one decision away from a different life that you would be living.
Exactly. And so it makes you think about destiny and all this stuff.
Me?
And so I don't know if it's not about really regret. It's just like, have you ever thought about what your life would be like? And I feel like that happens when you do have kids. And so it touches on like the concerns that we have. It's because as parents, you say, oh, what if I didn't have kids? But as non-parents, you say, what if I did have kids? Right. It's like the opposite. And I think that there are a lot of concerns, and one of them is on the next question we asked, because those 2 next questions are kind of like the same question.
Yeah,
almost.
They're pretty similar.
But it's just like, do you ever think about the freedom you don't have anymore? And are you ever envious of people who do have that freedom?
Yeah.
And my sister straight up said no, she's not envious of them. And this, again, I thought that this was incredibly insightful. She said, they have their own drama. Kids or no kids, they have their own issues going on in their life. And I'm not envious of that. And she said, maybe for sleep, but in general, like just like catching up on sleep, she said, her life would be boring without them. She said, my kids are what I look forward to every day. I'm never alone. Some friends have cats, she said, and that's boring. That doesn't excite her, And so she just like never knows what she's going to get from her kids, like Braden, he's just,
Keeps
you never
you on
know.
Your toes.
Yeah, you never know what he's going to say. And she said someone came up to her the other day and said, oh my God, I just love him. He is just so insightful, and like he says crazy things, and and it's true. And so I thought of that too, because I always think about when life is boring, it'd be nice to have a little rugrat, running around. And then I'm like, yeah, but that would get old quickly. So it's like this balancing thing of is it, I just feel like certain people are certain ways, and my sister's definitely a kid person.
Yeah, she is, and she has the best kids. We have the best nephews.
Yeah.
We only have nephews, and it's really fun, especially boys. They do
Yeah.
keep you on your toes. They say some off the wall stuff, and they're just so funny. I
Right.
love it. And my sister's answer to that question is absolutely. I forget what it feels like to just get up and go and not have to worry about anyone else. I've adapted though. And then also, she does at times feel envious of like friends and
Yep.
people without kids. So I feel like both ways are like natural thoughts to have. Like they're going to come up one time or another.
Absolutely.
But all in all, I don't think either of our sisters regret having kids, no
No.
matter like how hard it is.
Right. Right. And it is totally natural to have thoughts. I think some people make it seem to be not natural to think like that or awful or whatever, but it's just like you're humans. Clearly, you're always going to be there for your kids, but I think that's normal things to think about. And for us, I think it's normal, especially when you look at someone thinking about and preparing to have kids, because you always do have those concerns. So, like some of the concerns that people can have going into parents, and I think that they're totally normal. Is just, is it the right time?
Right.
For a number of reasons. Can we afford kids?
Mm-hmm.
How will it impact our relationship? I think that's
Right.
one that we always consider. Like,
Right.
Again, it sounds awful, but I think it's a normal thing to ask. Are kids going to get in the way of our love?
Yeah. And
Like,
I always,
Yeah.
you know me, I always think about that. I'm like, well, I don't want to have kids because they're going to like take you away from me. And I want it to just be me and you, like undivided attention. Like, I don't even want a dog that badly because I'm like, I want all of Mitch's attention. And I just can't imagine when we have kids. Like, I'm just kidding. But
Well, especially if we have a little girl.
yeah. Oh, God. Yeah. Anyway, also Mitch and I spend like all day, every day together, so that will be a hard adjustment.
Right.
Yep.
And then just the thought: will we regret having kids? Are we going to regret it? Maybe because of that, if it impacts our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Is our relationship ready to handle kids? Can we withstand the added stress?
Yeah.
I think this is something that I haven't really ever thought about, but are we going to pass on, generational trauma to them?
Right.
Because I've never really thought about that.
Yeah. And that usually happens through the mother, obviously, because she's carrying the baby, and that does
And
definitely.
they're crazier.
What'd you say? What did you say?
I say, and they're crazier.
And so that definitely, the mother is stressed out and the mother's obviously carrying the baby. Any generational trauma, stress, anxiety, depression, you're going to pass that on to your baby. So that's why I also think it's really important to get therapy.
And then I asked the question, is passing on trauma like that even avoidable? That's the question I always think about. Because I generally feel like life has trauma. Like life is not just good, it also has suffering, right? The yin and yang of life. Right? And part of that is going to be suffering, and it's going to bring on trauma. And so, like, it's to the point of how much trauma is good. Yeah,
Okay,
like how much trauma is acceptable, like on the bar of trauma, like, or if there's trauma, do you have to just like offset it with some goodness? You know what I mean? Like is that even, because our genetics and stuff and how we're made out, we act certain ways and stuff, and we're not perfect. And so I just thought about that, like, how much trauma are you gonna pass on? Is it avoidable even? Anything. I'm thinking like Buddha and stuff, like like just hiding them away from all the pains of the world. That's clearly not good, because then they're not going to grow up and know anything about life. And so it's just like that's what I always think about, even like punishment and stuff like that. Like how much love to show them, how much tough love, how much punishment. Those are the things that I think sometimes you have to like work out as you become a parent. But I always just think about, those are the concerns that I have. It's just like, how much punishment is good enough? How much punishment is not enough? How to punish them and stuff like that. and then how to offset that and whatnot. Because I feel like in my family, it was like my dad showed the punishment, and then my mom offset it.
Yeah.
And my dad offset it a couple of times, but only when, you know, not a lot. So
Yeah.
it was like my mom and dad were like punishment offset. And so the next question that I was going to ask you, though, on top of do you want to have kids,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to ask why. And I'm asking why you want to have kids to try to get to like the importance of having kids.
Right.
To you, but also just to in general society.
Yeah. Well, for me, I honestly didn't really become fond of the idea of having kids until like super recently. Like I mentioned, I was always like, I don't want them to take you away from me, blah, blah, blah. But I feel like the older I'm getting, the more I'm kind of understanding why people have kids and why I want to have kids. And for me, I want to have kids because it's like, what else is there to life? Well, I know there's more to life than having kids, but I feel like, I mean, family has always been so important to me. And as I've gotten older, you know, you move, relationships become strained, like childhood trauma comes up. And I think I want to have kids kind of as like to prove that like I could be a good parent. Why are you doing that?
Because that's what that woman said in that story.
Really?
Yeah, her mom died, and then she wanted to have a kid because of all these hormones, and that she wanted to prove to herself that she could be a mother.
Yeah.
And then she regretted it.
Okay, scratch that. Let's start over.
It's just, I didn't want to bring that up, but you just said exactly what she said, so.
Okay, so we're not having kids anytime soon. The hormones are right.
But I feel like for her, it was more of like a momentary thing, and you've felt like that for quite a while.
Yeah. I mean, okay, let me gather my thoughts.
Right.
You caught me off guard here with this question, even
You just
though.
gotta be realistic about it.
Yeah.
Right? You can't have kids just so you can prove it, right? This is a person's life. You know?
No, absolutely. And that is not the main reason I want to have kids, to like prove that I can be a good mom.
Of course. Yeah.
But I'm just very family oriented. I like the idea of raising a good human, and I don't know what else to say.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. I think that's my reason. I've always wanted to have a kid. Even when I was younger, I always just picture myself as a dad. Because of family. I want to pass on my genes to someone. I don't want the rolling name to end with me, you know, and at least in my family, right? I've always loved the idea of having a kid. And I think as I've gotten older, I've questioned, is that selfish of me? You know what I mean? Because I want to pass on my genes and stuff. But I don't think so. I think that that's a burning desire of a lot of people, a lot of men, a lot of women, wanting to have their own spawn, you know? And
I feel like hold on. I feel like I have to kind of backtrack, and because people are going to be like, you want to have kids because blah, blah, blah.
no, I think you said because of family.
Yes.
Because you're family oriented.
Yes.
Because you know, it's just I think that's the case with everyone. It's just family. That's what you live life for.
Yeah.
And that's why I always wanted to have a big family so that it would be brought up like that. Like I like big family Thanksgiving dinners and stuff. And, you know, I think a big part of this is like, having no kids when you're young and mobile and can travel, that's fun. What happens when you get older?
Right.
And life gets a little lonely. All your friends don't live in the same state anymore, and you have no family.
Yeah.
You know, that sounds pretty damn sad to me.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to go out that way.
Right. Right.
So yeah, I'm just family oriented, and I think that family has a big. I just think it adds a lot of value to your life,
Right.
and gives you purpose. You know.
Right. And if you're thinking about having kids out there and you have an answer to this question, why do you want to have kids? I feel like it's a question that people think they know the answer to, but once they're asked, it gets a little harder. But put it in the comments. Why do you want to have kids? And if you don't, why not?
Yeah.
And then if you're a parent, did you regret it?
Yeah.
And if you're not a parent, did you regret it? But I also wanted to ask you, I know the answer to it,
Oh, okay.
but who do you think is happier? Parents or people who decide to not have kids?
For some reason, I'm going to say parents.
Parents?
Because I feel like people who are so against not having kids, and that's your own choice. Like, you don't have to have kids. I'm not forcing you to have kids. But
Right.
I feel like the people who decide they don't want kids, not all, but obviously a percentage of those people who don't want to have kids, I think they make the decision based on their life in the moment, and they're not really thinking too far in the future. Like you said, when you're old and all your friends are gone and you don't have any family, who are you going to call? Like, you're going to die alone. I think a lot of people are also very career oriented. And if that brings you joy, great. The thought of that does not bring me joy.
Right.
Why am I getting emotional?
You gonna cry? You gonna cry?
Wait, whoa!
Oh, you're
What
tearing
is going
up.
on?
Oh my God, babe.
You guys, I have no clue what's going on right now.
I think you want kids.
I think I want kids. The thought of like homeschooling my kids, cooking Jesus Christ, cooking meals for my kids, like that brings me joy.
Right.
Like that sounds like a purpose-driven life for me.
Right.
And I think a lot of people who are choosing not to have kids right now are making that decision based on, well, I want to go travel.
Right.
Well, I want to do this. I want to be free.
Like
and
us.
that's great because I do too.
Yeah.
I love traveling. We love traveling. And that's going to be hard with kids. But I think that kids just make life more fulfilling, more interesting. They keep you on your toes. They teach you things.
Right.
You grow learning from them. And that's my answer.
Right.
Because I'm going to cry if I continue. So.
Well, it's interesting that you say that non-parents make that decision in the moment and they're not thinking long term. Because what I read was that parents, when you have like, and you know, when we do this stuff, when you ask someone, are you happy?
Mm-hmm.
Depends on the time you asked them.
Right.
Depends on if they're like, yeah, I'm happy, you know, but they're not.
Right.
So it's all subjective, I think, but these are just what the surveys say, that parents on the happy scale, they usually get a little happy bump right after the birth, and then it dissipates over time. And then the gap between happiness for non-parents and parents widens. Generally, life satisfaction is the same. On surveys, I think non-parents report being a little happier. I don't know how that trend goes, you know, when they get older, you know, like we said, like having no family and whatnot. But, you know, generally it's the same thing. You get a little bump when you're a parent right after the birth. However, parents note more of daily swings, right? From really like having lots of joyful moments and having lots of stress. Whereas non-parents are kind of coasting, like maybe not as much sway in the day. Right?
Yeah.
And that just makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
You have a lot of moments, like your kid could make you smile and happy in one moment, and then in the exact next, they take it too far, they break a vase or something, and you could just
that's
be
funny though. Like,
right.
I know that in the moment I'm gonna be like, ugh.
Right.
Like this is so frustrating.
Right.
But
Well, that's a good thing. That's a good thing to notice, right? Because I think that's an important thing to keep in mind when you do have kids is keep the humor a little bit. Don't make it all so serious, you know. And that's something I'm trying to tell myself too. Like it's in my list of how to prepare for having kids. And one of that is just to remember the humor of life, the humor nature. Not everything is so like
rigid,
and like you don't have to be that like strict parent. And
right.
I'm gonna be a strict parent, but you don't have to be like that strict parent, you know.
Yeah.
You can still have some fun. They're gonna make mistakes.
You're gonna be such a fun dad. I already know it.
Oh, I'll have
like
my
the way
fun
I
moments.
see you with our nephews.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're gonna be a fun dad.
Yeah. And they're gonna be mine. That's what I'm gonna love about it.
I know.
Because with my nephews, I can't do everything.
You can't like really discipline them and stuff
well,
like that.
And not even just discipline, but just like I don't know, fathers can just have so much fun with their kids.
Mm-hmm.
When I was looking up like things to prepare for having kids, things to do to prepare to have kids, I was thinking about us and what I wanted us to do
Mm-hmm.
and what we've talked about. And so, the first one, I think this is the most important one, is just make sure that you have a healthy relationship. And I think we do, and we work on that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're good on that.
Yeah.
But we also talk about that, like make sure our relationship is healthy and can withstand a kid. And I think that's so important because I don't want to divorce at all, but I really don't want to divorce after
With
having
kids,
kids.
yeah.
And, I'm not judging anyone who has done that. My sister did that. Sometimes you got to get out of a rough spot. But that's why I think it's important before you have kids to understand, are you in a good spot?
Yeah.
Right? Is there no leaks in it, Are you
Mm-hmm.
going to stay together? And so I think that's an incredibly important thing to ask. And I think we do ask that. And then I think this is another one that we always talk about. What roles are we going to have?
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, my dad was the discipliner. My mom was
The
the
nurturer.
nurturer, and they played that pretty well. Like my dad disciplined me pretty harshly, and my mom loved me pretty severely. Like
Yeah.
it's, there was that good balance.
Yeah. You're not a mama's boy, though. Even though your mother loved you severely.
Right. I think that happens when you, like I had two parents that I could respect.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I loved my mother, and I respected her because she showed me love. I also respected my dad because he never gave me a reason to think that he wasn't a stand-up person.
Mm-hmm.
And, you don't even really think of that stuff as a kid, but you just have like this guy is not to be messed with.
Keep looking around.
Right. But he loves me, he loves me, and he's fair. I think that's it too. I always knew my dad was fair, but I also knew that he was a man,
Mm-hmm.
and I wasn't going to mess with him. And that going into my adult years, I just he's a guy that I can look up to. I can aspire to be like him, in so many ways. And that's what I always knew about my dad. So, I think that helps not make you a mama's boy, when you know that your dad's fair and you have a good example of who he should be. And he wasn't a mama's boy. And I just think that's in your family, really,
Mm-hmm.
And I just, oh God, we watch shows sometimes and there's mama's boys and they actually bother me.
I know, I'm
pretty
like,
severely. Just the same as daddy's girls, but I feel like there's more mama's boys out there.
Yeah.
But then also what we've been talking about today, discuss the lifestyle changes that will come and influence your relationship with each other. There's a side, or there's a question to ask. Is it going to influence us? And there's a clear answer. Yes.
Yeah.
There's going to be an influence on our relationship. But then what to do with that? Because you can make it, the influence doesn't have to make it bad. The influence can also be good if you discuss it and are real with it and have realistic expectations. I also think, resolving issues between us and also just in life in general, like pay off your debt or something like that is really helpful. And then the last one, like I started this off with, remember humor and avoid unneeded stress.
Yeah.
And I say that because I feel like a lot of people create stress.
Mm-hmm.
They create stress where they think that it's okay to be stressful. I don't know if that makes sense, right? But like, I feel like you almost give yourself a pass to be stressed out when you, and like just like anything, you give yourself a pass to be mad when you know you can be mad, even though maybe the more noble option is to just like, do some woo-saws and count to 10, you know what I mean? But,
yeah.
And I just feel like people can be attached to a certain type of feeling. And I think maybe parents can get that way too, where just like every little thing gets them all stressed out. And I just want to avoid that, right? And I think I try to avoid that in my life in general. I've always been that person in my family too, where if people are like bickering about stupid things, but like it's like normal things where people would bicker about, but you just know deep down that it's just dumb. I've always been that guy to be like, why are we fighting about this?
Yeah,
like,
you do.
Can we just like go to Easter dinner and be fine?
Yep. You are that guy. But that's one of my favorite things about you because you balance me out so well with that. I don't do very well with that.
Right. Well, it
I
gets
mean,
me in
maybe-
trouble because
maybe-
sometimes you want to have a fight, and I'm like, "What are we even doing?" Like, you don't care about me.
Shut up. I think that I'm that person for my family as well, though. But in our relationship, you're that person for me.
Right.
Where like you bring me back down to earth and you just like ease my stress.
Yeah.
Which is good.
Yep. No, I think that's a good dynamic to have. Did you have a question you wanted?
I have questions for you.
Okay.
How would you feel about raising children in an interreligious household? Because if you guys are new here, I was raised Christian, and while I am challenging and
Finding yourself?
rediscovering my faith and my beliefs, I'm still spiritual, but Mitch is Jewish,
Yeah.
so
I was raised Christian, but I converted to Judaism. And so if we had kids like tomorrow, we just wake up and have 5 little rugrats, we would have an interreligious family.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, we're still discussing that part too. Like, is it, should we go down to one? Should we raise them with one idea of what a religion is? And I think that if we were to have an interreligious family, I would want, my ideal would be to not be so strict about the religion part, but to share the stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to raise your kids with those stories so that they can have a basis in it as they grow up, right? Like, I was raised Christian, converted to Judaism, right? But my thinking is based in that, like, Judeo-Christian thought, like the story of Abraham, the story of Moses, the story of Jesus. But, and so my ideas were based in that, and I think it's good to have that basis so that you can talk about what they actually mean later on in life. And I got that without having to go to church. I didn't really go to church as a kid. I went here and there when I was like 4 or 5, but I barely remember it. But I did grow up with a religious background and those stories. And so I think the most important part is to share those stories, because I don't think and this is why I think this way, I don't think that the religion is the part that is really important. I think it's the stories within the religion that are the most important part, and then the rituals within the religion that kind of sanctify those stories. I think that that's the most important part. It's not necessarily the institution of the religion. I don't think that you have to be a Catholic or a Jew or a Muslim to enter whatever heaven is. I think it's the lessons that those religions impart on you through the stories that are within the Bibles that those religions have. I think that those lessons and how you live your life according to those lessons are the most important part. And if there is a heaven, I think it's more about how you lived your life and not about what religion you chose, right? And a lot of people probably disagree with me on that, right? Because I've looked at the surveys, and especially like Protestants, certain Protestants, Mormons, and Jehovah's Witnesses, they definitely think that the majority of them think that you have to be you have to be a part of like the correct religion to go to heaven. Surprisingly, all the other religions were pretty back and forth on it. Most of them were saying that no, there's more than one way to heaven, and even Catholics, especially Jews, even Muslims. And I thought that was pretty, Buddhists and Hindus, for sure, because that's like in their religion too, like just the idea that there's many pathways.
Yeah. That's the problem I have with Christianity, I think.
Right. Well,
this is like a topic for a whole nother podcast, like religion, whatever.
Right.
But I think that's why I am kind of questioning it so much and struggling to feel like I belong in it.
Right.
Because I'm like, how can one people think like they are the way.
Right.
Like they are the only way, they're the correct way. And like you could say the same thing with race. You know what I
Right.
mean? Once upon a time, white people thought they were the right way. And anything other than that, it's like, no, that's just like not right.
Well, and once upon a time, all races were trying to compete for that hierarchy of,
Yeah.
even Gandhi was doing this, and it's the same thing with religion, I think.
Yeah.
The only difference is that you can choose a religion,
Yeah.
It's not as easy as that, but like technically you can choose it, but can you really? Like if
Right.
you're born in the Middle East, are you really going to choose to be a Jew or choose to be a Christian? Probably not.
Yeah.
And if you're born as a Christian in the United States, like clearly I converted, but I am one of few. And it's just it's just I never got that. I never understood that either. Like how
It's just thinking so simply about life. Like
It's way
life
too
is
simplistic.
way more complex than that.
Right.
And like, come on.
And it comes down to the ideas. Did God really put in the system, right? Put in the design of the world that to enter the kingdom to come, right? To enter the kingdom of God, it's going to just boil down to you chose the right religion. I don't think that's the case, right?
Yeah.
I don't think that's the case. So, the religion part is not necessarily the most important to me. The spiritualness of the stories and what they impart on you are the most important part to me.
And what they teach you about life.
Right. So long story short, while I think that the influence of religion and their stories are good. It's not necessarily the religion that's important to me. And luckily, we can still impart Judeo-Christian values because we are Judeo and Christian. And
For
so,
now. No, I'm just kidding.
yeah, right. So I'm not too worried about that. I think that it would be great to show them both a church and a synagogue, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I do think that diversity can just improve you, right, and improve your outlook on life, especially, not just being so tied to one. As a kid, I thought literally like if you didn't believe certain things about Jesus, you were going to go to hell.
Yeah.
And even when I converted, one of my uncles told me that, and basically was just like out of concern, because he was.
Which one? We don't put this in there.
We were drunk. But
Does he remember that? Do you think?
I don't know.
Oh
but,
my God.
I converted out of Catholicism, and that's their belief that if you don't believe in Jesus, if you don't think Jesus literally died for your sins and literally, resurrected and literally went to heaven and whatever, then you're
dead.
You don't have a part in heaven.
Yeah.
You chose the wrong religion. And so I think that our kids will be fine. I don't think that there's a problem raising them in a religious families, as long as you're not tug of warring with them. As long as you do it right. But I do think that that's a good little segue into asking: does religion and just religious values, do they influence how many kids that you're gonna have?
Right, because I think the obvious answer is yes. Like we see it a lot with certain religions.
Right, especially Mormons. I'll just give that away right
Yeah,
now. Mormons.
Everybody know the Mormons be popping them out.
And it's not even close. Like the average amount of kids for an American household, this is a couple years old, but it's still relevant, is 2.2 kids. 2.2 or 2.1.
Yeah, something like that.
Right, and Christians, anywhere from 1.9 to 2.3. Catholics have the highest, and Protestants have the lowest. Mormons and Jews, they're like 1.7 or something like that. Mormons are 3.4.
Yeah.
Like that's the average. They, on average, have more than 3 kids.
Yeah.
And
Mormons just be having kids. That's what they do.
And, so why? Why do they have kids? And I think that's clear too. It literally tells you in the Bible to, what's that one phrase?
Be fruitful.
Be fruitful and multiply or something.
Yeah.
Like that. But yeah, be fruitful and multiply.
Yeah.
Have kids basically.
Yep.
But I also think that it's pretty, like as an institution goes, I think that it's important for a religion to incentivize having kids. One, because you need kids to keep your religion,
Yep.
right? You need to have more of those kids that are of that religion, being born into it. So longevity. Also, though, and this is where you get a little crazy. And this is, I was reading up on Mormons, and so I think that this is a big part of it too. Like, souls are waiting to be born. And so there's this idea that Mormons want to have a lot of kids so that they can put those spirits into the proper religion, right? And I think that's just what I read about Mormons.
Yeah, that's probably scary, though.
That's probably something to do with like a lot of religions. I'm sure a lot of people think that, like, oh yeah, but like I just thought that was like I've never heard it put that. Oh, like, babies are going to be born anyway, so might as well have them be born into our institution.
Oh wow.
So I thought that was pretty interesting. And maybe that is a big reason why. I was reading Reddit boards too on this, and a lot of people were saying, well, that's the only time they can have sex, so they marry young and have lots of kids, and they're not really taught a lot about. I'm sure that's just lots of hearsay, but it's just interesting to see how religion does impact your relationship. And when you go religious versus non-religious in America, religious people have like 2.1, 2.2. Non-religious have 1.7. And so atheists are 1.6 kids. And agnostic, this is the part that really surprised me, 1.3. They were the lowest on the list. And this is Pew Research. So it seems that, Jewish were 2.0, whereas Protestants 2.2, Catholics 2.3, and Mormons 3.4.
Jeez, that blows my mind. Not because I'm surprised, but just how high it is compared to everybody else. I'm like...
Yep.
And I mean, I see it so much, like with the YouTubers that I watch, and just, I think Mormonism is a very controversial religion on social media. So I just see it all the time, but it's like, geez, that is like a pretty vast difference.
Huge. Yep. And it just seems that like the more fundamental and dogmatic you are about your religion, I feel like the more kids you have, the more it influences you. I feel like, because when you look at the religions, you go on one spectrum, Jews, where it's a really big cultural influence, not necessarily religious, and so they have less kids. But when you kind of go up like the dogmatic scales up to Mormonism, where the majority of them believe that you have to be a Mormon to enter heaven, and there's only one way to interpret the Bible, and that's the Mormon way. And whereas other religions don't necessarily think that, and they have the most kids. I didn't see any numbers on Jehovah's Witnesses, but that's it just seems to have a big influence on your family size and stuff. And maybe that did influence me. Maybe that's why I wanted 8 kids.
And now, how many would you be okay with if we were to have kids?
Honestly, I'm like all over the board. I like I can see myself having no kids.
Yeah.
And I can see myself having a whole lot of them.
Yeah.
Like 8 still.
Whoa. Okay.
I can't picture you having 8 kids.
Hell no.
I can't picture you being pregnant 8 times.
God, no.
Yeah. We would have had to start 4 years ago.
Right. I think 2 or 3. 3 is like my maximum.
Right.
But like 2, I would be happy with.
Right. And if you're religious or a story, put it in the comments if you feel influenced by your religion. Like, I wonder if it's also like, because not having kids is kind of like taboo, or at least it used to be, right? People would judge you. It's not looked down upon as much anymore, though, right? But I feel like maybe in religious circles, that's not necessarily the case. And maybe that it's not as looked down upon anymore because more people aren't religious than they have ever been. And maybe it's just, and we kind of see it, atheists and agnostics don't even have 2 kids per household, right? And so maybe they just feel less pressure, and maybe religious people feel more pressure from where's your kids? Like,
I think that's a valid assumption.
Right. And yeah, so we covered a lot of stuff. We covered if we want kids, our concerns about having kids, what we should do to prepare to have kids. We touched on why other people aren't having kids, economic concerns and stuff like that. And I think that we have covered a lot. So
Yeah, we definitely have.
Right. So I think that that's where we're going to call it. Again, if you have any insight about being a parent, regretting kids, it's okay. You're probably anonymous anyway, so you can tell us. But yeah, if you have any insight into what we talked about, please share in the comments. We want this to be a discussion, not just between us, but with everyone.
Yeah.
And if you're thinking about having kids, what are your main concerns? Maybe you have a concern that we didn't touch on today. But overall, I think that we do want to have kids. We have the same fears of if it's going to affect our relationship. We also have the desire to travel more. I feel like we hit a lot of the boxes that people that people are when they're discovering if they want to have kids. Like we want to have kids, but we also want to wait because we want that time to ourselves. Right? We're like in the middle here, and I would say 2 or 3 kids is probably where we're gonna end up.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah,
in a few years.
In a few years.
Couple to a few years.
We've been saying that every few years.
No, for real though.
Yep. But yeah, so thanks for joining us, guys. That was our podcast. I don't have the topic in my head for the next one, but you will find out soon. Anything else you want to say, baby?
Subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. Like we said, it really helps us out. And we hope you are enjoying the podcast segments on this channel. We love doing it and just having these open and honest conversations. It's really fun. So we want you guys to join in on it. And I think that's it. We'll see you guys in the next episode.
Peace out, guys.
Bye.